Finally, I'm at the top. I'm the first person to ever climb this... Wait, what? What? Who got here first? Whose flag is this? Lift the flag a little earlier next time, okay, Caddy? Nintendo is home to a lot of successful series. Series like Mario, Pokemon, Zelda, and Animal Crossing are known around the world and have millions, if not billions of fans. But for every popular series, there are about 10 that are considered forgotten. I feel like I've said that before. Whether victims of low sales, tied to hardware gimmicks, or controversy, not all series can survive. Every once in a while, an obscure one can claw its way up the food chain, but it's not easy. So would you believe me if I told you there was one series that accidentally became a big name overnight by barely doing anything? This is the story of how Ice Climber tricked you into thinking it's a star. Now, what is Ice Climber? I know I said it's a series. Well, it's actually not a series, it's just one game. Well, kind of. It's most well known as an NES game, but there was also an arcade version released that same year. There were also some super obscure home console ports, a Game Boy Advance cartridge, e-reader cards, and numerous emulated versions. But at the end of the day, they are all the same game. Some versions have differences and are, like, technically separate games, but at the end of the day, they're all, like, 85% the same thing. I'll begin with the NES version because that's what nearly everyone, me included, thinks of when they hear Ice Climber. The game is a vertical platformer about scaling a mountain. You play as the titular ice climbers, the blue one being named Popo and the pink one being named Nana. They both have mallets they use to break blocks and fight enemies. Your jumps are very strange. You can jump super high, but have very little forward momentum. The platform collision is also very janky. There have been countless times where I've been sure I was going to land on a platform, only to go right through it. Not to mention the ice you run along is slippery, so positioning yourself for a jump can be very difficult. These controls are the biggest flaw with the game. While I think the bizarre controls are just part of the experience, it can often feel very nonsensical. The game would already be difficult with better controls, so these make the game insanely hard. All the levels follow a similar pattern to a vertically scrolling mountain. Obstacles include breakable ground, unbreakable ground, conveyor belts, moving clouds, and dropping icicles. The clouds are the hardest to traverse. They move so fast platforming can feel impossible at times. There are a few enemies to add to the challenge. The main ones are these little yeti guys called topies. They walk from side to side and are easily defeated with a single mallet hit. They will run off screen and return with an ice block, which will fill in part of the hole when it collides with the hole. While we know these guys as yetis, in Japan they were originally seals. This was changed because of how much it looked like seal clubbing. I think the yetis were the right move. The seals are not really threatening. Next up are these pink birds called nitpickers and fly around and swoop down to hurt you, but a simple attack from the mallet will take them down. There are bird enemies with the same name in Donkey Kong Jr. Interesting. Our Ice Climber and Donkey Kong Jr. take place in the same universe? Is Ice Climber's canon to Mario? But hey, that's just a few. And lastly, for enemies, we have the polar bear. Well, they gave up on giving these fun names. This guy only shows up if you take too long to move upward. Once he is on screen, he will make the screen go up automatically. This feature is to help prevent soft locking by killing you if you are stuck. When you get to the top of a level, you get a bonus stage. This involves you getting to the top of a short level to grab onto a pterodactyl before a timer goes out. Luckily, if you reach this bonus stage, you automatically win that level. This bonus stage is only for increasing your score. If you do reach the pterodactyl in time, your ice climber will be jumping with happiness on the victory screen, and if not, they will be crying. The main way to get points in these bonus stages is by collecting these vegetables, and if I love anything, it's 8-bit foods. The Ice Climber's menu includes fresh eggplants, carrots, cabbages, cucumbers, corn, turnips, jack-o'-lanterns, celery, potatoes, and mushrooms. The corns are the only vegetable that have a second use, that being 1-ups. One of the most important features is the multiplayer. Simultaneous multiplayer was quite the selling point on the NES. While there is a good chunk of NES games where you can play at the same time, not many were platformers, so it's somewhat interesting here. The game feels a lot more fun with a second player, but I think that speaks more to my friends than the game. I do like how you have the freedom to either play cooperatively or competitively. And if you two goof off too much and can't get past the level, all levels can be unlocked from the start. That does eliminate some of the challenge, but I mean, if you don't like it, just don't use it. While I'm wrapping up any other notable things, the manual refers to the lives as men, and I think that's kind of funny. Can't wait to find the Infinite Men cheat code. Now, would I recommend this game? Look, I love these simple early NES games. Balloon Fight, Mario Bros, heck, even Gyromite, all my jam. But Ice Climber is pretty rough and gets old fast. I wouldn't say it's bad. I mean, it's certainly better than some other black box games. But I feel like it's very overrated, and a lot of people will be disappointed. The average price of a loose cartridge is $21, and that's a bit much. It's also a little hard to find in my experience. I've only ever seen like 2 cartridges out in the wild, and I've been retro game hunting for like 3 years now. It's not rare by any means, but a lot of copies have already been bought up. Luckily, this NES version can be played on the Wii, Wii U, 3DS, Switch, NES Classic Edition, and Animal Crossing. It's a charming part of Nintendo history, but one I'm not really dying to re-experience. Releasing the same year as the NES version was the arcade version called Versus Ice Climber. It's called that because it was on the Versus line of arcade machines. It had 2 screens, so 2 players could each have their own screen in multiplayer, but this game does not use that feature, and you must share a screen. While this version is largely the same, there are a few differences. There's a new title screen and level select menu, some levels have snowstorms that constantly blow you to the right, in some levels the pterodactyls replaced with a butterfly, there's a new rare fly enemy, there are new vegetables, the only one that remains the same is the potato. If you're interested in seeing the differences between the 2 versions yourself, you can buy this version on the Nintendo Switch eShop. This version of the game was also available as a Famicom Disk System game, and it's very accurate to the arcade version. Next up is something you don't see often, officially licensed Nintendo games on a PC. Nintendo is notoriously protective of its IPs. Something they own not on their own hardware is rare. But remember, this was very early in the company's venture into home consoles, so PC ports weren't seen as big competition. Games that hit the computers were Excitebike, Balloon Fight, and of course, Ice Climber. The games were released on the PC-88 and Sharp X1 line of home computers. Yeah, neither of these computers were that popular here in America, so I'm pretty sure these PC ports are Japanese exclusive. Now, I couldn't get any of these working for myself in time for this video, so I'm getting my info from videos. The PC-88 port was developed by Hudson Soft. They're probably most well known for the early Mario Party games and the Adventure Island series. They also developed PC versions of Balloon Fight. The game looks way worse than either the NES or arcade versions. The graphics are downgraded with less colors, the sounds are all completely different. The game struggles scrolling upwards and needs to choppily shift the camera upward. The last thing of note is the seals from the Japanese version are present. The Sharp X1 version is better, but still not on par with the NES version. Colors are off, sounds are different, and the seals are back. Just like normal Ice Climber, these PC ports are cool in a historical sense, but that's it. Decades later on the Game Boy Advance, there is some significant Ice Climber news. In 2004, Nintendo released a series called the Classic NES series. This series consisted of emulated NES games for the Game Boy Advance. While that sounds really cool on paper, I found the execution to be a little lackluster. The thing that bothers me the most is that the games are squished to fit the wider screen of the GBA. They edited the sprites to be shorter and they look so bad. Why not just add black bars on the sides? This could just be me, but the changing of the sprites is so unsettling. Another big problem is the number of titles. In Japan, there was a total of 32 games released in the series, but in America and Europe, we only got 12 of them. And out of the 12 we got, not all are what I would have chosen. Like, in Japan, you have Kid Icarus, Ghosts and Goblins, Balloon Fight, and you give us poor Americans Xevious? Name one American who knows what Xevious is. Also, did we really need another version of Pac-Man on GBA? Especially the worst NES version? And of course, we got Ice Climbers. As previously stated, these versions are squished and have edited sprites. Ice Climber actually looks the best after the change, but that could just be because I'm far less familiar with Ice Climbers than something like Super Mario Bros. This image is sacred. Besides the visuals, not much is different. Some sounds are a little different, some colors are weirdly off, but you know, no deal breakers. The second biggest change is the multiplayer option on the menu doesn't show up unless you have 2 GBAs hooked together with the link cable. This is a pretty good way to play the NES original on the GBA. A loose cartridge's average price is only $13, which is fine. It's cheaper than the NES version, so if you really need to get your Ice Climber fix and are living paycheck to paycheck, it does the job. But why was this game chosen to come to America? More on that later. Before we move on from the GBA, there was one more Ice Climber port. Does anybody remember the e-reader? No, not a Kindle. The Nintendo e-reader was an accessory for the Game Boy Advance that could scan cards to unlock content in certain games. Games like Pokemon, Mario, F-Zero, and Mega Man Battle Network all use the accessory. But what if instead of adding stuff to games, the cards could unlock the entire game? Well, here are the NES e-reader cards. Scan 5 cards in a row to unlock an NES game. All the games are black box games because these early games were so simple that they could fit on cards. Since the games had to be light on content, a lot of C and D listers are in the series. Sure, there's some heavy hitters like Donkey Kong and Excitebike, but there's also Pinball and Clue Clue Land. While most of the time Ice Climber would feel like a wasted slot, when put up against games like Urban Champion and Tennis, it's looking pretty good. How's the quality? It's very similar to the classic NES series version, but with even more condensed visuals. I couldn't play it for myself, so I can't report on the gameplay, but I hear the visuals are the only big downside. Okay, time to address the elephant in the room. The reason anyone even slightly cares about the Ice Climbers is of course because in 2001, they joined the Super Smash Bros. Series. Being the second Smash Bros. Game ever, Super Smash Bros. Melee had a lot of important characters to add. Bowser, Peach, Zelda, Ganondorf, Mewtwo were all must-haves. But despite having such a long laundry list of characters to add, the game added so many weird characters. Dr. Mario, Young Link, Pichu? Sakurai wanted a character to represent the Famicom/NES, and after narrowing down many considered characters, the Ice Climbers eventually won. Considered characters include Balloon Fighter, Mach Rider, Excitebike, Bubbles from Clue Clue Land, and Urban Champion. I don't think the inclusion of Ice Climbers is just strange from a popularity standpoint, but also a mechanical standpoint. The Ice Climbers' whole gimmick as a fighter, or fighters, is that there's 2 of them. You control one of them while the other follows you and does the same attacks as you. I have a sneaking suspicion that this gimmick was thought of prior to the idea of Ice Climbers being a character, because I don't think anyone would have batted an eye if it was just one Ice Climber. That makes the choice of Ice Climber for this mechanic even stranger when you realize this mechanic could have worked for so many other characters. Sure, Ice Climbers marketed its multiplayer, but not that much compared to any other NES game. You know what else is multiplayer? Balloon Fight, Excitebike, Clue Clue Land, and Urban Champion. And all those 4 guys didn't make it. I do think this made the most sense on Ice Climbers compared to all those guys, but still. I think the Ice Climbers being added was just a matter of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, of needing the NES rep and to use this gimmick. Now, just because the Ice Climbers are a bizarre pick doesn't mean I don't like them. They actually represent my favorite thing about the Smash Bros. Series. The Super Smash Bros. Series introduced so many games to people who would never have heard of them otherwise. I learned about tons of my favorite games from Smash, like Pikmin, Animal Crossing, Mega Man, Metroid, Punch-Out!, and my favorite game ever, Earthbound. Being represented in Smash Bros. Is like winning the marketing lottery for a video game. It can turn anyone into a star overnight. So many game series would be dead without Smash. Yet despite this incredible second chance, the Ice Climbers did nothing with it! This is why the series frustrates me so much. Ice Climber got the spotlight any developer would kill for and never did anything with that popularity. Look at Kid Icarus. The series had 1 NES game and an obscure Game Boy sequel for decades. But once the main character, Pit, got in Smash and gained popularity, the sky was the limit. The series got a brand new game based off the designs in Smash, and the game was fantastic, one of the best games on the 3DS. It got 1.5 new characters in Smash, AR cards, figures, an animated short, and a poster. That popularity was fleeting, but by gosh, they made the most of it. Better to melt your wings flying too close to the sun than never begin flying. Balloon Fight and Excitebike have both done more stuff before and after the Ice Climbers got in Smash. Freaking Mr. Game & Watch has done more stuff. Nintendo is sitting on money. It seems like a cruel joke to make everyone a fan of the Ice Climbers just to never use them. The saddest aspect of this is that in the Ice Climber stage in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, the fish from Balloon Fight appears on that stage. Yeah, it's a cool reference, but they are so desperate for things to adapt, they have to take things from other games. Ice Climber needs a new game. And the best part is, the game could be anything. Nobody cares about the original game. We all just like the characters from Smash. So you have the freedom to make the game whatever you want. A 2D platformer, a 3D platformer, an It Takes Two style co-op game, a Souls-like,
anything. As long as there are two of them, ice and big hammers, go crazy.
Even if there hasn't been a new game since the original, there are some other footnotes. The little guys have been in Smash Melee, Brawl, and Ultimate. They infamously skipped Smash Wii U and 3DS because the 3DS couldn't handle two characters at one time. Except Rosalina and Luma. And Duck Hunt. They did at least get a trophy in both games. Being Smash Bros. Fighters, they have their fair share of stages, songs, spirits, trophies, and even an amiibo. The NES Ice Climber game has been playable on the Wii, Wii U, 3DS, Switch, NES Classic Edition, and Animal Crossing. There was a demo on Smash Bros. Brawl, and amiibo tapped Nintendo's Greatest Bits. Challenges using the game's engine were an NES Remix and Nintendo World Championship NES Edition. The game's sprites and music were in Tetris DS. The WarioWare series has many Ice Climber themed microgames spanning several different titles. The Ice Climbers are a mystery mushroom costume in Mario Maker. And lastly, there are some extremely rare Ice Climber erasers.
You couldn't make a new game when you had time to make erasers?
Ice Climber is in such a weird situation. It was a nobody who was given the chance of stardom and never did anything with it. It wasted the opportunity other games would kill for, and all for nothing. It's a game that isn't really popular, but a game we're just told is popular. It's famous for what it didn't do, and not what it did. All this for a mid-NES game. It's not too late though. I would love for this video to become obsolete. Let's shout to the mountaintops. We want a new game with our favorite ice climbing twins? Friends? Rivals? Lovers? Okay, who here ordered the pizza? Ugh!